The first time the world heard the name Silent Hawk was on a winter morning over the icy front lines of the eastern skies, when an entire squadron of bombers vanished into smoke without a single distress call, and no one could explain what happened. The survivors from the ground swore they saw nothing but shadows streaking across the clouds, flashes of metal glinting for only a heartbeat, and then fire raining down from above. No radio chatter, no warning, only the sudden thunder of explosions and then silence. It was as if death itself had glided through the clouds, invisible, merciless, and gone before anyone could comprehend the shape of its wings. The reports that followed described the same impossible detail again and again, that after each strike no enemy aircraft was ever seen retreating, no contrails in the sky, no trace of fuel or engines, only silence as if the killer dissolved into the heavens themselves. They began to whisper the name Silent Hawk, a ghost in the sky, a figure born of rumor and fear, a phantom hunter who appeared only long enough to strike and then vanished as though swallowed by the clouds. Pilots who laughed at the story at first grew quiet after mission debriefs, for more than once they had returned to base with trembling hands and sweat on their brows, claiming they had felt a presence, an unseen shadow locking on them from above, before something else was chosen instead. To them it was not a legend, it was a predator that picked its prey with a chilling patience. The commanding officers dismissed it as superstition, yet their eyes betrayed unease, because the casualty records told their own tale: whole flights wiped out with surgical precision, enemy formations broken apart without explanation, and always the same signature of silence that followed. What unnerved the strategists most was the consistency. It was not the chaos of ordinary dogfights, not the messy clash of steel and bullets. It was clean, exact, deliberate, as if one hand guided by uncanny instinct had orchestrated the kill. The truth, of course, was buried deeper than anyone imagined. Silent Hawk was no ghost, nor a supernatural being born of war, but a man, or perhaps something more than a man, sitting alone in the cockpit of a black-painted fighter that few had ever seen and none had ever survived. His real name was buried in classified files, sealed by governments that pretended he never existed, but those who had brushed against the shadow of his legend knew he was not ordinary. He flew with the kind of precision that seemed impossible for flesh and blood, reading the air currents, the movements of squadrons, the weaknesses of machines as though he could see 3 steps into the future. To face him in the sky was not to fight but to be hunted, and pilots who had even glimpsed the sweep of his wings never forgot the feeling of doom that settled in their stomachs. Yet what made him more terrifying was not just his skill but his vanishing. After each kill, when pursuit was inevitable, when searchlights raked the heavens, when entire air wings scrambled to corner him, he was gone. No radar trace, no echo, no wreckage, as if the clouds themselves had hidden him. Some said he slipped into a fold of sky where no machine could follow. Others swore he had stolen technology decades ahead of its time, cloaking devices, engines that left no signature. And there were those who whispered darker things, that he was a spirit bound to the machine, neither alive nor dead, doomed to fight forever and vanish with the wind. But there was one man who knew better, because he had seen Silent Hawk with his own eyes, not in fleeting glimpses from the ground, but up close, in a clash of fire and steel that should have ended in death. His name was Marcus Hale, once a decorated pilot himself, who now lived half forgotten in a cabin by the mountains, carrying the weight of memories no one believed. He never spoke of that day in detail, but those who earned his trust and listened long enough would hear the outline of the story. He spoke of being sent on a mission no one wanted, escorting a vulnerable convoy through hostile airspace. He spoke of the sky being unnaturally still, the clouds too quiet, the horizon too empty. Then out of that silence came the strike. 2 of his men gone in a heartbeat, their planes bursting into flame before they could even call out. Marcus had banked hard, desperate to find the attacker, and then he saw it. A shape cutting through the clouds like a blade, sleek, black, unmarked, its wings catching the faint light of dawn. He remembered the way his chest froze, the way his instincts screamed that this was no ordinary enemy. And then the chase began, a spiral of death across the sky, Marcus fighting not only for his convoy but for his own life. He had never flown harder, never burned through his reserves so recklessly, but each maneuver, each desperate roll and dive, was met by the silent hunter with perfect counters. It was like playing chess against a master who already knew every move you would make. Marcus should have died that morning, yet for some reason he did not. At the last moment, when the Hawk had the perfect kill locked, something shifted. Instead of the final strike, the black fighter peeled away, rising into the clouds and disappearing as though it had never existed. Marcus landed alive, his squadron gone, his convoy scattered, his reputation scarred by accusations of cowardice. No one believed his account of the ghost-like machine or the way it vanished. They chalked it up to trauma, to the imagination of a broken man. But Marcus knew what he had seen. He knew there was a reason Silent Hawk had spared him. And deep inside he feared it was not mercy but something far stranger. A message, a warning, or perhaps an invitation that one day would demand an answer. Marcus Hale spent the years after that encounter trying to bury the memory, but memories of the sky never truly stayed buried. At night he would wake drenched in sweat, hearing the phantom roar of engines, seeing again that black silhouette rising into the dawn mist, leaving him alive for reasons he could not understand. He drank to silence the echoes, but silence brought the memories louder. Every time he looked at the stars he wondered if the hawk was still up there, watching. The war ended for most men, medals pinned on chests, graves dug for the fallen, lives rebuilt in fractured ways. But for Marcus the war never ended, because his greatest battle remained unfinished. He moved to the mountains, far from the noise of the cities, but even there the stillness carried reminders. The wind cutting over the peaks sounded too much like wings slicing air, the call of hawks circling overhead drew his eyes up with a shiver. And always, deep down, was the gnawing knowledge that he had been chosen, spared, for a purpose he could not yet name. It was years later, long after most had forgotten the name Silent Hawk, that Marcus found his past colliding with his present. One evening as a storm rolled across the mountains, a knock came at his cabin door. He had no neighbors for miles and no reason to expect company, yet when he opened the door, a man in a dark coat stood waiting, his eyes sharp and unwavering. The stranger introduced himself simply as Colonel Vayner, a name Marcus had never heard, and without waiting for invitation he stepped inside as though he already belonged. He spoke with the precision of someone who carried secrets, and every word seemed weighted. He told Marcus that the legend of Silent Hawk had not died with the war, that in fact sightings had continued in the years since across different regions, always the same pattern. Squadrons destroyed with surgical efficiency, witnesses reporting the same vanishing into the clouds, and always no trace left behind. Governments whispered, intelligence agencies speculated, but no one admitted the truth publicly. According to Vayner, Silent Hawk was real, still flying, still hunting, and far from finished. Marcus listened in silence, his chest tightening with the confirmation of what he had always known. But the colonel had not come just to confirm ghosts. He placed a folder on Marcus's table, thick with photographs, reports, radar anomalies. In one photo Marcus's breath caught, the unmistakable shadow of the hawk etched against the twilight sky, identical to the one that had spared him all those years ago. Vayner leaned forward and said the words that would anchor themselves in Marcus's mind. "He spared you, Hale. Do you know why?" Marcus shook his head because how could he know? But Vayner's stare told him the answer mattered more than he realized. The colonel explained that every recorded encounter ended in destruction, save one, Marcus's. That made Marcus unique, the only living pilot who had ever been in Silent Hawk's sights and survived. Vayner believed there was a connection, something the hawk had seen in Marcus that no one else carried. And now, the colonel continued, that connection might be the key to ending Silent Hawk once and for all. Marcus resisted at first. He was no longer the man he once had been. His body ached with the wear of years, his reflexes dulled. He had long since left behind the cockpit. But Vayner pressed harder, telling him this was not just about reliving the past but about preventing a future where entire fleets would fall to a ghost no one could fight. He spoke of experimental craft, of nations terrified of shadows in the sky, of intelligence leaks that hinted Silent Hawk's origins were not foreign, but born from within their own side, an experiment gone wrong, a pilot who had crossed the line between man and something else. The more Vayner revealed, the more Marcus felt the air tighten around him. He remembered the way the hawk had flown, not like a man but like an instinct sharpened to unnatural perfection, anticipating every move before it was made. It had felt almost inhuman. And now, to hear that Silent Hawk might not just be a pilot but a creation, a weapon never meant to exist, chilled Marcus deeper than any winter storm. Still, part of him resisted the call. He told Vayner to leave, to let him drink his memories in peace, but the colonel only stood, calm as the storm outside, and said, "You can try to run from the sky, Hale, but the sky never forgets its debts. When he comes again, and he will come for you." With that, the colonel left, vanishing into the storm as suddenly as he had appeared. Marcus sat in silence, staring at the photographs, the shadows of wings that haunted his every thought. He tried to convince himself he could ignore it, that he was too old to chase ghosts. But that night, as lightning split the clouds, he dreamed again of that black shape cutting across the dawn, and in the dream the hawk's cockpit turned toward him, and for the first time Marcus swore he could feel eyes watching him through the glass. He woke with his heart hammering, his hands trembling, and knew with cold certainty that the colonel was right. Silent Hawk had not spared him out of mercy. He had spared him for something yet to come. And now, the sky was calling him back, whether he was ready or not. Marcus did not intend to return to the sky, not at first, but the sky had its own way of calling men back to it, and for someone like him, the call was not just in the roar of engines but in the marrow of his bones. Days after the colonel's visit, strange things began to happen. He noticed a low hum at night, vibrations that rattled the windows of his cabin though no storm stirred outside, and when he stepped into the cold air, he thought he saw a shadow against the moon, gliding silently, too large to be a bird, too swift to be a storm cloud. He tried to dismiss it as imagination, but the feeling of being watched grew heavier, like an invisible weight pressing on his shoulders. In town, strangers appeared, men in unmarked uniforms, eyes scanning him from across the diner, questions disguised as small talk. He knew surveillance when he felt it, and these men were not here for coincidence. Vaynor had unleashed something and Marcus was caught in the middle of it. Finally, when he returned one evening to find his cabin ransacked, every drawer overturned, every scrap of paper examined, he realized he had no choice. The hawk was not just a ghost story, it was real and it was circling closer. With a mixture of dread and resignation, Marcus contacted the colonel, who arrived as though waiting for the call. This time Vaynor did not ask, he ordered. He told Marcus he would be transported to a secure facility, a place where old pilots were tested, where new aircraft were forged in shadows. Marcus resisted, but his resistance was meaningless against the weight of inevitability. Within days he was flown in a transport across barren landscapes to a base that did not exist on maps. There, behind steel doors and guarded halls, Marcus saw what the world never would, aircraft unlike any he had known, sleek, angular machines that seemed sculpted out of darkness itself, engines whispering instead of roaring, wings designed to cheat the very air. Engineers spoke of stealth coatings, of systems decades ahead of what public air forces admitted. But even among these marvels, one hangar remained sealed, guarded by men who carried more authority than soldiers, men whose silence spoke of things too dangerous to share. Marcus's gut told him that whatever was in that hangar had everything to do with Silent Hawk. Vaynor confirmed it one evening, walking him through dim corridors where echoes felt like ghosts. He revealed that Silent Hawk was not a rogue pilot from the other side as so many had believed, but one of their own, born from a program buried under layers of secrecy. Decades ago, in desperation to create the perfect weapon, the military had experimented with merging man and machine, enhancing reflexes, training instincts to a razor edge, and amplifying them with technology no one outside the Black Projects could comprehend. They had succeeded, too well. The pilot they created surpassed every expectation, mastering the sky in ways no one thought possible. But perfection came at a cost. He grew detached, alien in thought, less man than something else. His kills became too clean, too precise, and one day without warning he disappeared into the clouds, never to return to base. They had tried to erase the project, to bury the failure, but the legend lived on in every squadron that fell under his silent wings. Marcus listened in silence, his chest tightening with the weight of it. So his instincts had been right. What he had faced was not a man in the ordinary sense, but something sharpened beyond humanity, something that had slipped the leash. Vaynor's voice hardened as he continued, "You are the only one he spared. That is not chance. It means you are part of this, whether you want to be or not." The colonel then took him to a simulator room where the air smelled of metal and sweat, and screens projected endless skies. They strapped Marcus in, placing controls in his hands again, and though his body resisted, though his muscles ached with the rust of years, something deep inside him responded. His instincts returned, slow at first, then sharper, the old dance of sky and speed awakening in his veins. 4 hours they pushed him through simulated battles, recreating the impossible maneuvers Silent Hawk had been recorded making, and to their shock, Marcus began to keep up. Not perfectly, not like the Hawk itself, but enough to glimpse the shape of what it was doing. His mind began to trace patterns others missed, to feel where the Hawk would strike before the program even moved. The engineers whispered, unsettled, because in Marcus they saw something terrifying. A resonance, a connection, as though some invisible thread bound him to the ghost in the sky. That night, unable to sleep, Marcus wandered the base, past guards who eyed him with suspicion, past hangars humming with energy. He found himself drawn to the sealed hangar, the one forbidden to him. He stood in the shadows, staring at its silent bulkhead doors, and for a moment he swore he heard something beyond them, the low hum of engines that were not running, the faint echo of wings beating against air. He knew without proof that inside that hangar lay the truth, perhaps even a twin to the Hawk itself. The thought chilled him, but it also set his jaw with grim resolve. If he was to face the Hawk again, he needed answers, not shadows. And as dawn broke across the base, painting the sky blood red, Marcus made his decision. He would fly again not because he wanted to, but because destiny had left him no choice. The Hawk had spared him once, but the next meeting would not be about mercy. It would be about truth, and only one of them would leave the sky alive. The first time Marcus sat inside the experimental craft, he felt as though he had stepped into the nervous system of a living creature rather than a machine. The cockpit was nothing like the planes he remembered from the war. Gone were the clunky dials and rattling levers, replaced by glass panels that shimmered with shifting data, controls that responded to the faintest flick of his fingers, and a canopy so wide it felt as though he were suspended directly in the sky itself. Engineers hovered around him, explaining systems, but Marcus tuned them out, listening instead to the way the aircraft seemed to breathe beneath him. Its engines whispered, almost as if alive, and when he touched the throttle, a thrum traveled up his arm that made his heart beat faster. This was not a fighter, it was a predator dressed in metal and lightning. Vaynor stood nearby, arms folded, watching him with the intensity of a man betting everything on one gamble. "This isn't about flying faster than him," the colonel said. "It's about understanding him. You're the only pilot alive who's seen him up close. That means you think like him, maybe more than you want to admit." Marcus bristled at the words, but deep down he knew Vaynor was right. From the moment he had first crossed paths with Silent Hawk, something in him had shifted, some instinct awakened that had never gone silent since. The simulations had shown it, the way he anticipated moves that baffled younger, sharper pilots. Now, inside this black-winged beast of a machine, he felt the thread tighten between himself and the ghost. Days blurred into weeks as they trained him, forcing his aging body to relearn the reflexes of youth. His muscles screamed, his lungs burned, but his mind sharpened, cutting through patterns, solving aerial puzzles designed to mimic the Hawk's impossible maneuvers. Again and again he faced simulated scenarios, and though the ghost always had the edge, Marcus grew closer to catching it, shaving seconds off reaction times, closing gaps that once seemed eternal. At night, though, the dreams worsened. He would wake drenched in sweat, seeing the Hawk's black silhouette hovering at the edge of his vision, its cockpit glinting with some faint reflection, always watching him. Sometimes he dreamed of being inside that cockpit himself, looking down at the world through glass that separated him from everything human. In those dreams he felt no fear, no hesitation, only the cold, sharp hunger of the hunt. He would wake trembling, wondering if he was preparing to kill the Hawk, or to become him. One evening, after another punishing round in the simulator, Vaynor finally revealed the truth behind the sealed hangar. He led Marcus past layers of guards and security, down echoing steel corridors until they stood before the massive bulkhead doors. With a nod, Vaynor ordered them open, and what lay inside stole Marcus's breath. There, suspended under lights like an artifact from another world, was an aircraft nearly identical to the one Marcus had faced in the war. Sleek black wings, curved in a predatory sweep, hull coated in a material that seemed to drink the light around it. The Silent Hawk's twin, or perhaps its progenitor. "This was the prototype," Vaynor said quietly. "The machine they built before the one that went rogue. We've kept it locked away, studying it, trying to understand why the pilot turned. But every system, every scan tells us the same thing: it wasn't the machine. It was the man. Or what was left of him." Marcus circled the craft slowly, his hand brushing the cold surface. The moment his skin touched it, a jolt of familiarity struck him, as if he had touched a memory rather than metal. For a heartbeat, he was back in the sky, the black wings cutting past him, the predator's eyes burning through glass. He pulled his hand away sharply, his chest tight, and Vaynor's gaze lingered on him with unreadable calculation. "You feel it, don't you?" the colonel asked. Marcus said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Over the next days they prepared him not only to fly but to hunt. The mission was clear: lure Silent Hawk into combat, lock him into a battle long enough for tracking arrays to pin him down, and end the legend once and for all. But Marcus knew it would never be that simple. The Hawk was not just a machine or a pilot, it was an instinct, a shadow, something that defied ordinary rules of engagement. To face him again would not be like fighting an enemy, it would be like facing a reflection sharpened into something merciless. On the morning of the mission, Marcus suited up with the gravity of a man preparing not for battle but for fate. The air on the runway was cold, The horizon washed in gray dawn, and as he climbed into the experimental fighter, he felt the weight of inevitability settle into his bones. Vayner stood at the edge of the runway, his expression carved from stone. "Remember," he said over the comm, "he knows you. He will come for you. Use that." Marcus strapped in, pulled the canopy down, and for the first time in decades, felt the thunder of engines rise around him not as memory but as reality. The black-winged machine lifted from the ground like a bird freed from chains, and the world fell away beneath him. He cut through clouds, through the vast emptiness of sky, searching for the ghost he knew was out there. The mission planners filled his ear with coordinates, chatter about patrol zones and radar sweeps, but Marcus tuned them out. He didn't need them. He could feel it the same way a prey animal feels the predator's eyes in the brush. The hawk was near. Hours stretched, the sky empty, but Marcus's nerves hummed with certainty. Then without warning the silence broke. A blip on his radar vanished before it could be locked. A flicker of shadow sliced past his canopy too fast for cameras to catch. His heart jolted in recognition. He was not imagining it. Silent Hawk was here. The chase was beginning. The moment Marcus felt the hawk's presence, the years melted away and he was no longer an aging man strapped inside a machine built by younger hands. He was a pilot again, heart pounding, nerves alight, every instinct sharpened to a single edge. The sky, once vast and empty, now thrummed with tension, each cloud a veil concealing death, each shaft of sunlight a corridor that could reveal a hunter. He tightened his grip on the controls, eyes scanning not for shapes but for movements, for the subtle ripples in the air that betrayed something cutting through it faster than the eye could follow. Then it came, a streak of black slicing across his peripheral vision, gone before his systems could lock, but close enough to make his skin prickle. His radar chimed an instant too late, a ghostly echo already fading. He banked hard, chasing a shadow that wasn't there, and the comms erupted with frantic chatter from the ground crew trying to track what couldn't be tracked. "He's with you, Hale." Vayner's voice cut through the noise, sharp and urgent. "Stay focused, he'll test you before he strikes." Marcus didn't need the warning. He remembered this dance. The hawk never killed immediately. It circled, probed like a predator testing prey for weakness. The air around him felt alive with menace, and then without warning tracer fire stitched across the space he had occupied a split second earlier. Marcus rolled hard, feeling the shudder of air tearing against his wings, and when he leveled out he caught his first clear glimpse. The hawk, sleek and black, wings angled like blades, gliding as if the sky bent itself to carry him. The sight hit Marcus like a physical blow, dredging up years of memory, the same terror and awe that had haunted him since their first encounter. But this time he did not freeze. He dove, throttling hard, cutting across the hawk's path, and for the first time the ghost adjusted, matching his move with eerie precision. It was like facing a mirror that moved faster than thought. They clashed through the clouds, spiraling, diving, climbing, their engines screaming through the air, each maneuver countered by one just as flawless. Marcus's chest burned with the effort, his body straining against the G-forces, but adrenaline and memory carried him through. The hawk pressed him, bullets sparking across his tail, each shot impossibly precise, never wasted, never hurried. Marcus dodged, countered, pulling maneuvers that younger pilots would have failed, trusting not his eyes but the instinct that told him where the hawk would strike before it moved. Again and again they met in flashes of fire and steel, neither able to claim the kill, the sky itself echoing with their duel. Below, the world watched in silence, radar screens blinking and vanishing as the two fighters wove in and out of existence, too fast, too stealthy for technology to hold. Only the pilots themselves felt the full weight of the battle, a contest not just of machines but of wills, of predators locked in a contest where one mistake meant death. At one point, Marcus nearly had him. He cut across the hawk's arc, lined up the reticle, finger tightening on the trigger, and then the hawk vanished. Not dodged, not rolled. Vanished. One heartbeat he was there, the next he was gone, swallowed by cloud and silence. Marcus's breath caught, his finger frozen on the trigger, and a sick dread filled him. This was the signature, the impossible vanishing that had made the hawk a legend. His comms erupted with voices demanding a visual, a lock, anything, but Marcus knew it was useless. The hawk was gone but not gone. He was out there, circling, waiting as he always did. The silence stretched, unbearable, and Marcus's pulse thundered louder than the engines. Then, in a flash of instinct, Marcus rolled left, just as bullets tore through the space his cockpit had occupied. The hawk reappeared like a phantom, already on his tail, merciless, precise. Marcus dove, engines howling, pushing the craft beyond safety, the frame shuddering as air clawed at it. He twisted, spun, inverted dives, maneuvers that should have torn the wings apart, but the experimental fighter held, whispering through the madness. The hawk stayed with him, glued to his movements like a shadow that refused to detach. And in that relentless pursuit, Marcus felt it again, that strange, chilling familiarity, as if the hawk was not just an enemy but a reflection of himself, moving with the same instincts, the same thought patterns, only sharper, cleaner, perfected. It was like fighting his own ghost. The duel dragged on, minutes stretching like hours, until Marcus's muscles burned and his vision blurred from strain. Yet something inside him refused to yield. He had been spared once, chosen for reasons he still did not understand, and now he felt the weight of that choice pressing on every move. The hawk wanted him alive before. But now the intent felt different. The attacks were merciless, the precision absolute, as though the ghost no longer wanted to test him but to finish what had been left undone. Marcus's fuel gauge dipped lower, alarms flickering, but he ignored them. All that mattered was the hunt, the endless spiral of predator and prey, though he could no longer tell which was which. Then, in a desperate maneuver, Marcus cut throttle, letting the hawk overshoot, and for the first time he had a clear shot at the black machine's engines. He squeezed the trigger, guns blazing, tracer fire lancing through the sky, and he hit. Sparks erupted across the hawk's tail, fragments spinning off into the air, and Marcus's heart surged with a wild, fierce hope. He had wounded the ghost. But instead of spiraling down, instead of faltering, the hawk rolled impossibly, stabilizing in a motion no human pilot could survive, and then he was gone again, vanishing into silence, leaving only smoke trailing briefly before dissolving into the clouds. Marcus gasped for air, sweat pouring down his face, his hands trembling on the controls. The comms screamed with questions, but he had no answers. The hawk had bled, but he had not fallen. And as Marcus steadied his fighter, scanning the endless horizon, he knew the truth with cold certainty. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. The hawk had shown weakness, but in showing it, he had also sent a message. The next time there would be no mercy, no vanishing sparing of life. The next time, the sky would claim one of them for good. The night over the jungle was not a silent one. Crickets screamed from the trees, owls turned their heads to unseen movement, and distant drums from a village far below whispered to the stars. But to David Kane none of it mattered. He lay inside a darkened hut, his mind racing faster than the engines of the silent hawk itself. The villagers had welcomed him and Alvarez with shy reverence, offering food and shelter, but Kane could not rest. His chest rose and fell quickly, thoughts pulling him in two different directions. On one side, the promise of uncovering the truth about the ghost pilot who had haunted the skies for decades. On the other, the creeping suspicion that Alvarez knew far more than he let on. Alvarez sat opposite him by the fire, his hands clasped, his eyes reflecting flames. "You look troubled, David," he said calmly, his Spanish accent soft but edged with something Kane could not define. "You have the expression of a man about to make a mistake." Kane met his gaze. "You knew about this place before we got here. You knew the villagers, you knew the stories, you even knew the exact path through the mountains. That wasn't luck." Alvarez did not flinch. He leaned forward slightly, letting the fire illuminate the lines of his face. "When you hunt a ghost, you learn to listen to whispers others ignore. That is all." But Kane wasn't satisfied. "No. This isn't just whispers. You've been here before, haven't you?" For the first time, Alvarez smiled, not the sharp smile of amusement, but one of resignation. "Once. Many years ago. Long before you knew my name." He looked into the fire. "I came searching just as you are. And I almost died in these mountains." Kane frowned. "What happened?" Alvarez's eyes seemed to grow distant. "I saw the hawk. I saw it descend through the fog like a phantom. Its guns tore through a convoy I was protecting. I lost friends that day. And when I tried to follow, the jungle swallowed me whole. I wandered for days, starved, burned by the sun, until I stumbled upon these villagers. They saved me." He touched his chest as though remembering the weight of their kindness. "Since then I have listened to them. Their legends are not stories. They are warnings." The fire cracked, sending sparks upward. Kane sat back unsettled. He didn't know whether to believe Alvarez fully, but the man's voice carried scars too deep to be false. Yet still, Kane could not shake the suspicion that Alvarez's path had not crossed his by accident. That night, Kane dreamt of roaring skies. He saw a black silhouette dive through clouds, its guns blazing with fire, its shape sharp yet elusive, like smoke wrapped in steel. And each time it struck, he swore he could hear a laugh echoing across the wind, a laugh that chilled him to his bones. When he awoke, sweat clung to his neck and Alvarez was already standing outside, staring at the dawn with his rifle slung over his back. "Today," Alvarez said without turning, "we climb to the plateau. That is where the hawk feeds." The plateau rose like a jagged scar in the jungle, its cliffs steep and walls sheer, as if carved by a titan's hand. The path was treacherous, with loose stones that slid under their boots and vines that tried to ensnare their legs. The air grew thin, sharp in their lungs, and the cries of birds echoed strangely against the cliffs. The higher they climbed, the more Kane felt a weight pressing on him, as though unseen eyes were measuring his every step. Hours later, they reached a ledge overlooking a vast expanse. The jungle stretched below them like an endless green ocean, mist rising from valleys and rivers like steam from a boiling pot. But Kane's eyes were drawn upward to the sky, wide and endless, yet strangely heavy. He could feel it, a tension as though the air itself was waiting. Then the sound came. It began as a low hum, almost mistaken for the buzzing of insects. Then it grew, a steady thrum, mechanical yet haunting, vibrating through the stone beneath their feet. Kane's heart leapt into his throat. He knew this sound. He had heard it before, on grainy recordings in veterans' shaky voices in his own nightmares. "The hawk," Alvarez whispered. A shadow sliced across the clouds. For a heartbeat, Kane thought it was only mist playing tricks. But then the shape grew sharper, a sleek, deadly fighter, black as oil and yet glowing faintly along its edges, as though it were both machine and ghost. Its wings cut through the light, and its engines screamed with fury. Kane froze. "It's real," he breathed. "It's actually real." The hawk dipped low, circling with predatory grace. And as it passed, Kane saw something that shook him to his core. Through the glass of the cockpit, a figure sat, helmeted, motionless but unmistakably human. Its face was obscured, yet he swore its eyes glowed faintly watching him. Suddenly, gunfire erupted. The plateau around them exploded in dust as bullets raked the stone. Kane and Alvarez dove behind a boulder, the noise deafening, the air filled with smoke and shattered rock. The hawk screamed overhead, then vanished into the clouds as suddenly as it appeared. Silence returned, broken only by Kane's ragged breathing. His hands shook. It wasn't an illusion. We saw it. Both of us. Alvarez's face was grim. Yes. And it saw us. Kane's mind reeled. 100 questions crashed inside him at once. Who was the pilot? How had they survived decades of war, defying time itself? And why did they strike without mercy, only to vanish into legend afterward? As he caught his breath, he realized Alvarez was no longer beside him. The man stood a few feet away, staring into the mist where the hawk had disappeared, his expression unreadable. For the briefest second, Kane thought he saw something in Alvarez's eyes, a glimmer of recognition as though the ghost in the sky was not a stranger to him after all. Kane rose slowly. "You know more than you've told me." Alvarez's lips tightened, but he said nothing. The plateau was quiet again, but Kane felt the echo of engines still thrumming in his chest. The silent hawk was not just a story, not just smoke in the wind. It was real, it was alive, and it was watching. And for the first time, David Kane understood that chasing this phantom would not just reveal history, it would demand his soul. The jungle fell silent after the last echo of gunfire faded into the night. Alex crouched low, his breathing steady but heavy, eyes sweeping across the darkness as though expecting another attack. Sweat trickled down his temples, yet his pulse felt calmer than it had hours earlier. He was starting to understand the rhythm of the hunt, the way Silent Hawk moved, struck, and disappeared. For the first time, Alex felt like he was no longer just prey, he was beginning to think like the predator. The squad that had ambushed them earlier was gone. Some bodies lay scattered in the brush, others dragged away by survivors who fled into the shadows. Alex knew they would regroup, and when they did, their rage would make them reckless. But reckless enemies could be guided, manipulated, and destroyed. That thought gave him strength as he rose to his feet and checked his gear. His rifle was almost dry on ammo, his knife chipped, and his rations nearly gone. Yet his determination had never been sharper. Silent Hawk had been watching him, testing him, perhaps even teaching him. And Alex refused to fail. He moved quietly toward the cliffs where he had last seen the faint glimmer of the hawk's silhouette against the stars. The path wound upward through jagged stone and thick roots, each step crunching softly under his boots. His body ached, but he pressed forward, driven by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and something else he couldn't quite define, admiration. Silent Hawk was a ghost, yes, but he was also proof that one man could tilt the balance of war. Alex wanted to see that ghost up close. Hours passed before Alex reached the cliff's edge. Below stretched the endless green of the jungle, a carpet rolling into blackness under the moon. The air was thin, cool, carrying the distant smell of smoke from a village burned days earlier. Alex crouched there, staring into the horizon, when suddenly he heard it, the faint crunch of gravel behind him. He froze. His fingers slid to his knife. Instinctively, but before he could spin around, a voice cut the silence. A low, steady whisper that seemed almost inside his head. You followed well, soldier. Alex turned slowly and there he was. Silent Hawk. Not a shadow this time, not a blur of motion in the night, but a man standing before him. The ghost had form. Tall, lean, draped in dark gear that blended with the stone, his face was half hidden beneath a hood and streaks of mud. Only his eyes shone out, sharp and alive, the kind of eyes that had seen too many battles and survived them all. Alex's breath caught in his throat. For a moment he simply stared, unable to speak. You've been testing me, Alex finally said, his voice low but steady. Why? Silent Hawk tilted his head, studying him. Because war does not end with bullets. It ends with men who learn to think beyond orders. I wanted to see if you were one of them. Alex felt a strange surge of pride at those words, though he fought to keep his face composed. And what do you see? The hawk stepped closer and Alex resisted the instinct to back away. I see someone who could become more than a soldier. Someone who could carry on the silence after I am gone. His voice was calm, but there was a heaviness in it, as though the weight of years pressed down on every word. Alex frowned. What do you mean after you are gone? You're Silent Hawk. You don't vanish, you survive. For the first time, Hawk's eyes flickered with something almost human, sorrow. Even ghosts have limits. My body is failing. Each battle leaves its mark. I vanish after every kill because one day I will vanish for good. And when that happens, the silence must continue. Alex's stomach nodded. He had spent weeks chasing this phantom, hearing legends about his impossible survival, his invisible war. To think of Hawk as mortal felt wrong. Yet seeing him up close, Alex realized the truth. There were scars beneath the mud, tremors in the hands that had steadied countless rifles. Silent Hawk was not eternal. He was flesh, blood, and time was catching him. Why tell me this? Alex asked softly. Because you listened when others only fired their guns, Hawk replied. Because you studied when others mocked the unknown. You are not the strongest nor the fastest. But you are willing to learn. That is rarer than you know. The wind swept across the cliff, rattling the trees below. Alex felt the moment settling over him like a cloak. This was no mere meeting, it was a passing of something larger, something sacred. The hawk reached into his pack and drew out a small emblem, worn and scratched, shaped like the talon of a bird. He placed it in Alex's hand. This was given to me when I was chosen. Now I give it to you. Alex stared at the emblem, his heart pounding. It was heavier than it looked, not in weight but in meaning. You want me to become Silent Hawk, he whispered. No, the hawk corrected. I want you to become yourself. But carry the silence. Carry the shadow. When they look into the sky and fear what waits above, it should be you they fear. For a long time Alex could not speak. The enormity of the moment threatened to crush him. Yet beneath it all was a fire, a spark ignited by years of wanting to be more than a soldier in the dirt. Now he was being asked to rise, to become the legend others whispered about. He closed his fingers around the emblem and nodded once, firmly. I will. Silent Hawk studied him for a moment longer, then gave a faint smile, small, almost imperceptible, but real. Good. Because they are coming. Before Alex could respond, the crack of branches and distant shouts carried through the night. The enemy squad had returned, larger than before, moving up the cliff in search of their prey. Silent Hawk's figure blurred as he slipped back into the shadows, his voice drifting like a ghost on the wind. Show me you are ready. Alex gripped his rifle, his knife, the emblem pressing into his palm. The fear was still there, but so was something greater. He rose to his feet and turned toward the oncoming enemy, the jungle alive with their noise. This time he would not just survive. He would strike, vanish, and haunt their memories. For the first time, Alex felt the silence inside him, steady and unbreakable. The legend was not ending, it was being reborn. The world seemed to hold its breath the night Silent Hawk flew his last mission. The war had dragged on longer than anyone expected, consuming men, steel, and nations with equal hunger. Yet through it all, his name had grown into something larger than life, whispered by allies with awe and cursed by enemies with terror. They called him the ghost in the sky, the hunter who appeared from nowhere, struck with deadly precision, and then vanished as if swallowed by the night. And now, as rumors swirled that the endgame was near, everyone knew he would fly once more, but no one knew if he would return. On the airfield that evening, the atmosphere was thick with unease. Pilots who once joked about danger now sat in silence, their eyes drawn to the lone figure walking calmly toward his aircraft. The Hawk looked unchanged, his flight suit neatly strapped, his helmet tucked under one arm, his stride steady. But beneath that calm exterior, something was different. Those closest to him sensed a finality in the air, as though he carried not just his weapons but the weight of a choice he had already made. Some saluted him. Others lowered their heads. No one dared speak because words seemed too fragile to reach a man already halfway gone. When the engines roared to life, the ground shook. The Silent Hawk's fighter, sleek, scarred by countless battles, its fuselage patched and weathered, seemed alive as though sharing its pilot's spirit. As it lifted off into the night, the sound faded into silence, and the men left behind watched the darkness swallow the plane whole. They knew they might never see it again. Above the clouds, Hawk flew like a man unbound by earth. The sky was his cathedral, the stars his only witnesses. He had lived more lives up here than on the ground. The hunter, the savior, the myth. But tonight was different. He wasn't hunting glory nor vengeance. Tonight, his mission carried only one aim: to end the war on his own terms, whatever the cost. Intelligence had reported a convoy of enemy bombers preparing for a devastating strike, escorted by fighters in numbers that seemed impossible to break. Yet Hawk had chosen to go alone. To the commanders it was madness. To him it was destiny. The enemy formation appeared on the horizon like a dark swarm. Dozens of wings cut across the sky in perfect discipline, their silhouettes blotting out the stars. Any ordinary pilot would have turned back. Hawk only tightened his grip on the controls. The first streak of tracer fire lit the night, and then the sky became a storm of chaos. He dove into the formation with the precision of a blade, weaving through fire as if he could see the path before it formed. Planes exploded around him, their wreckage burning against the black canvas of the heavens. For the enemy pilots, it was like fighting a phantom. Each time they thought they cornered him, he slipped away only to strike from another angle. One by one they fell, consumed by his relentless fury. But even legends bleed. A burst of fire caught his wing, tearing metal and sending vibrations through the cockpit. Warning alarms screamed, smoke filled the cabin, and the Hawk felt the bite of mortality closing in. Still he pressed on, refusing to turn back. He was deep in the heart of the enemy formation, and if he retreated now, the bombers would break through and rain death on the cities below. He could not allow that. Not after all he had seen, all he had lost. He became the storm, diving straight into the bombers, guns blazing, his fighter groaning under the strain. One by one the giants fell, their wings sheared, their engines aflame, tumbling into the abyss. Then came the silence. The last bomber erupted in a ball of fire, and for the first time that night, there were no enemies left in sight. The Hawk had done the impossible, broken an entire wing alone. Yet his fighter was failing, smoke trailing, controls sluggish. He leveled out above the endless dark sea, breathing hard, the weight of exhaustion pressing against him. Somewhere below, waves crashed unseen. Somewhere far away, men and women would live because of him. He should have felt triumph. Instead, he felt only a strange calm. The radio crackled faintly with voices calling his name, desperate for an answer. But he said nothing. He knew they would not understand. He had given everything, and the sky had always been his true home. To land again, to walk the ground as if he were just another man, it would be a betrayal of the legend, a breaking of the spell. And so, with steady hands, he guided his crippled fighter higher, climbing into the thin air where the stars blazed brighter and the world below seemed small and far away. Witnesses on the coast claimed they saw him that night, his plane rising into the heavens until it was nothing more than a speck of light against the stars. Some swore it vanished in a burst of brilliance, others said it simply dissolved into the night, leaving no wreckage, no sound. Search parties combed the seas and mountains for weeks, but no trace was ever found. The Silent Hawk was gone, leaving only questions behind. Yet in the years that followed, stories spread. Pilots claimed that in their darkest moments, when death closed in and hope was lost, they saw a lone fighter cutting through the clouds, a phantom wingman guiding them home. Civilians told tales of hearing a faint roar in the night sky, followed by a strange calm, as though the ghost himself still watched over them. Historians argued, skeptics dismissed it, but for those who had ever flown or prayed for a savior above, the legend lived on. Time passed and wars ended, but the memory of the hawk never faded. His name was etched into monuments, whispered in songs and carried in the hearts of those who believed. He had become more than a man, more than a pilot. He had become a symbol, that courage could outfly fear, that sacrifice could outlast death, and that sometimes the greatest heroes vanish not because they are lost, but because they become something the world is not yet ready to understand. And so the ghost in the sky remained. Not buried in earth, not wrecked in sea, but eternal in the realm he had claimed as his own. Somewhere above the clouds, where silence reigns and stars burn cold, the hawk still flies, waiting, watching, his shadow forever stitched into the fabric of the night. The end.